Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today's guest is Emily Dunlop, the founder of the Good Marketing Club. The Good Marketing Club is a marketing consultancy that covers all your marketing bases, whether that be brand creation, testing new channels, running events, securing press coverage, or developing marketing strategies. She does it all. And she's a solopreneur that recently started this company. And so we speak about the early phases and how she started, why she started, and everything in between. I really enjoyed this conversation. We discuss things like what a fractional CMO is and does. We talk about what jumping between jobs can do and how it can diversify your experience to equip you to start your own thing. We talk about mentorship and how valuable it can be. And we also talk about just getting started and having self-belief. It's a wide-ranging conversation. I enjoyed this one, and I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the show. Hi, Emily. Thanks for joining me today. To kick us off, can you give everyone a bit of context and tell us a bit about the Good Marketing Club and what you guys do?
Yeah, so I'm Emily. I'm the founder of the Good Marketing Club. So what the Good Marketing Club is, it's essentially a brand name that enables me to operate as a solopreneur. So I launched the Good Marketing Club in June of this year. So it's very much early on in the journey, but having a great time. Essentially, I left my corporate job. I was head of marketing for a hypergrowth Series B that was headquartered in Singapore, was doing a lot of travel, had an amazing 2.5 years, which for anyone that's been part of a hypergrowth early stage startup, like 2.5 years, you get to experience a lot. You really get a lot of hands-on experience. And a lot of things were happening in my life. I'd recently relocated to Italy. I was starting to really get the urge and the desire to think about, like, could I do something on my own? I think that's the benefit of working as part of an early stage startup. You build this resilience, but you also get a real entrepreneurial spirit and this desire and this curiosity to see, is this something that I want to do or not want to do? So at the beginning of the year, I just started to think about this, and it kind of like manifested as I went. So left that job at the end of May and launched the Good Marketing Club in June. What the Good Marketing Club, like I said, is it's a brand name that enables me to operate as a solopreneur, where I work with early stage startups directly with the founding leadership team to understand what are the goals and objectives that they have, and therefore how do they do them through marketing. So that could be anything from fractional CMO work to also looking at founder branding, personal branding. So it's really diverse, but so far having a great time.
Amazing. And in our previous conversation, you mentioned that you have three sort of principles that you live by. Could you tell me what they are and why you live by those principles?
Sure. So what I loved about really starting my own business is that it was an opportunity for me to really build something that was authentic to me and how I like to operate. So the principles, which is almost like the values that I live by, there's three of them. So there's good marketing, because I really fundamentally believe that there's still far too much just average marketing out there. I think a lot of marketing teams will be able to relate, where you're just doing tick box things, right? You're being guided by, oftentimes it might be people that don't necessarily really understand marketing. So let's do a blog, let's do a podcast, let's post every day on social media, but they can't always answer why you're doing. So tick box marketing is something that I just don't believe in. So good marketing is, what that really means is that I want to be really proud of anything that I put my name to, but similarly, I want the clients and the people that I work with to be really proud and understand why we're doing what we're doing. So everything needs to be able to answer back to an objective. The second is around working with good people. I really fundamentally believe that the energy just hits differently when you're with good people. For example, and that goes for the people that I work with, the people that I hope to work with in the future in terms of my team as I grow. But even just this week, I was feeling a little bit flat. I was putting so much energy into my work and not necessarily doing enough in my kind of downtime. And I really believe that when you're hanging out with people that like have those same values as you, that have that same energy, good people really lift you. And so that's something that I'm really keen on making sure that I sustain in my day-to-day life as I'm building the Good Marketing Club. And the third is having a good time, because again, when you are having a good time, you're working with good people, you're doing good work, the results show. 9 times out of 10, when you see any execution that you really admire and you think that's a really, really great activity there that you're witnessing, guaranteed that's led by people that feel empowered, that are having a good time because they're able to live and do the things that they actually believe in, right? Nobody wants to be guided and told to do something that they just don't believe in. So they're the 3 principles. And that's really, 3 months in, by setting those principles from the beginning, by really looking into like my own positioning, my own unique value proposition, I've been able to attract the type of clients that I want to work with because, I'm being very intentional with what those values mean to me in the content that I put out through my LinkedIn and so on. So they have kind of really come into hand for me to be able to attract the right kind of people, the right kind of work. And I can definitely say that I'm having a good time as I'm doing that as well.
That's great. And you mentioned that also, like on the personal life side of things, finding good people. Has that been difficult or tricky at all, being in a new country?
Not really. It's not easy. So it's not something that you just do and it's easy straight away. But when I was 21, I moved to Berlin and didn't know anyone. Moved with 2 of my best friends actually, and worked for a fashion PR agency there. Had a great time, but I had that comfort blanket that I was with my friends, and so I proved to myself then that I could do that in terms of moving to a new country, finding a job, finding new friends and networks, but with that safety blanket of like my friends from home. So I knew I could do it. And I actually always thought ever since that time, that's like I'm 34 now. So I was 21 at the time, that I wanted to do that again at some point in the future, all on my own. And so the opportunity came about. So I knew I could do it. And it forces you to come outside of your comfort zone. Italy is actually, I live in Florence and many people do speak really good English, but you should learn the language. And so I'm loving that I'm able to build my business in and around also building new friendship networks, learning a new language. I'm learning a lot about myself, but I think you can do anything that if you put your mind to it, you are going to do it. And I don't see this as a challenge that, I know I can learn a language. I don't yet know that language, but I know by next year, hopefully I'll be able to have a fluid conversation because I've proved to myself in the past that I can do these things that I put my mind to.
Yeah, that's great. And as you touched on in an earlier answer, that marketing is quite broad. I mean, there's podcasting, there's newsletters, there's blogs, so many different things. So how did you settle on the services that you offer, or like, how do you go about deciding what sort of marketing tactics to use when you're working with a company?
Yeah, marketing, I think, is still one of the most misunderstood fields. And it's only getting worse, to be honest, because, anyone that has Instagram thinks that they can do marketing. And I always think, like marketers would never go up to finance and legal professionals and be like, this is how you should do your job. But we're always going to be up against this. With launching my business, actually, it's really interesting. I was speaking this week to a new mentor, actually, because whilst it's great starting my own and being intentional with the kind of work that I want to do, saying you're a fractional CMO still puts you at quite a broad, sweep of skill sets there. So, for example, I have a couple of clients now. Demand gen is a big part of most companies at the moment. They're needing to show immediate results, whether it's accountable to board members, shareholders, and so on. And so I'm starting to kind of pivot slightly with how I position myself, because where my real enjoyment lies is always going to be in brand marketing. I started my career in PR, went into social, went into influencer marketing, community events. So that's always going to be my sweet spot because it is a comfort zone of mine. But fortunately, by my own curiosity, I have had a full experience across product marketing, across demand gen, but I'm never going to be someone that gets really excited by spreadsheets and data. I like data. I can understand how to interpret it. But so now I'm actually starting to pivot slightly in my messaging because I really want to make sure that the long-term plan is always going to be mainly baked in brand marketing. But fortunately, by by just the inherent nature of doing fractional CMO work, you're able to consult as much as execute. So, for example, the companies that I'm working are either seed to growth stage. They all have different types of challenges, and I can kind of spot out, you might think this is where you should be focusing your time. Like a brief might come in that actually, the more I get to know the business, the more I get to know, what's working, what's not working. It's actually a very different brief. And so that's what I really like about doing fractional work, is that you're able to consult as much as also build that go-to-market strategy and execute upon what that vision needs to be.
I love the idea of a fractional CMO. Could you just explain a bit further what a fractional CMO is and
Yeah.
how much time you sort of spend on each company?
Yeah, for
How that
sure.
works.
So I think fractional work, fractional CMO, it's like any fractional field. You could be a fractional CFO, a fractional, legal professional. It's basically with companies, I think even more so recently with budget cuts, you're not always able to actually afford full-time senior leadership resource. Or it might be that you actually don't always need full-time senior leadership resource, right? When you're a growth stage company, or actually more when you're like a seed stage, you don't need to go and hire a full-time CMO. You typically need a growth hacker, a creative marketer, and a content creator. So by having a fractional CMO or fractional head of marketing to come in and help the leadership team and typically the founders understand, okay, this is where we're at now. Do you have your brand in place? Do you have the marketing foundations to set those new team members up for success when they join? That's the kind of work that I'm doing at the moment. So in short, a fractional CMO is where you work on a fractional basis. So you don't do 5 days a week. What I'm typically doing is between 2 to 3 days, where I will come in and build the strategy, set the foundations in place, do a lot of the internal education, because I think the higher up you get in marketing, a lot of the time, a lot of your job is basically having to validate why budget needs to be spent on what it's going to be spent on, educating your fellow leaders of what you're doing, getting that budget approved, and then giving your team members then the free rein and the autonomy, if it's aligned to the strategy, to be able to go and execute. Because again, I think you see it all too often where you've got CMOs and leadership in place and then they're kind of like micromanaging their teams. That's the beauty of a CMO, a fractional CMO, is that your job is to set expectations with your founder or your senior leadership team and set your team up for success, because you're only as good as your team. And that's where I get a lot of enjoyment at the moment.
Great. And would you say that it's an added benefit to be working with multiple companies at the same time? Like you can get ideas from one and take it across to the other and sort of experiment a bit more, and that could help each of the companies grow?
Yeah, for sure. I think marketing, in all the types of fractional work that there is, it's difficult because the expectation can be that although you're doing fractional work, the clients still do expect you to be accessible 5 days a week. So you do have to manage those expectations and get good at setting those boundaries. I think because I still am quite early on in the journey, what I'm really enjoying is actually being able to carve out, like, where do I really want to specialize in? Is this always going to be the long-term plan, or where are my passions either not being utilized, or how can I set them up for the future, right? So something that I'm really passionate around is actually personal branding, and especially founder branding. I still think it's one of the most slept on strategies. And if I look back at my career, starting in PR, working in social, I really understand kind of like value proposition, positioning, messaging, content. And you can see, think about, Tesla versus Elon Musk, Richard Branson versus Virgin. People want to know about the people that are leading these big companies. Like, we're all nosy by nature. And I think it's still a slept on strategy, but give us like 10 years, it will be part of the fundamental marketing mix. And so I really want to kind of start exploring, how do I start moving a little bit more towards that area while still getting to work with the kind of clients and the brand work that I get to do now.
Yeah, and I agree. My previous role was in personal branding.
Right.
So I also believe that there's huge value there. But an interesting thing with it is that a lot of people feel uncomfortable sort
Yeah.
of posting regularly online. Even if you have a team of people sort of creating the content for you, they can be very picky or very nervous about posting something online. Have you felt that pushback at all, or?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? There's this like misconception when you think you're building a personal brand and you think, okay, this is me building my personal brand, but you don't understand all too often that what you're really building is your reputation. Like, what do you want people to think and feel, and how do you validate that that's what your brand is? You know, I'm doing this at the moment with an amazing new client. Actually, it's a brother and sister, and very different kind of personalities. One's a bit more like, you know, you get to work directly with people to understand like what is their brand, and that's a really exciting process to understand like what are all those things that happen in your history and your journey in life, really, to get you to the point that you're at now. Finding where are people comfortable to go, you know. I think it's really interesting to actually watch personal brands as they're starting to be built, because a lot of the time you're testing what
Yeah.
works, you're testing your messaging, you're testing your tone of voice, your style, your formats, your themes, and so on. So I don't get pushback in the sense that I think it's people understand the value in it. There's always going to be that excuse of like, I don't have time, and how do you get over that? It's kind of starting to build in frameworks and processes so that, you know, you're building up your content pool, you're understanding, you know, your audience that you want to build as well. So yeah, there's going to be pushback in the sense of like, yeah, time and also pressure. I think that's something that even I myself have felt recently, because I'm really busy on client work, and that's where I'm focusing a lot of my time. And then you think, oh, I'm not building my brand at the moment, but that's okay. You know, no one really notices as much as you think. And that's the same with posting. You know, you think, oh, is someone really going to care about this? It doesn't matter if it flops, it flops. That means that you get that insight to know, well, that post hasn't worked. Or if it takes off, brilliant, you've got those learnings and insights from that post as well. So I think you have to just a little bit get over yourself, by realizing like not everyone's watching you as much as you think they are.
Yeah, very true. And as you've mentioned, that the Good Marketing Club is still very new, and I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about what it's been like starting your own business.
Oh my gosh, I've loved every second. I mean, I'm not going to lie, of course, there's highs and lows, but I have learned so much about myself, and you know, I think I'm really blessed actually. I think if I look back on my career, when I was younger, I used to get a bit insecure that I had hopped around a little bit. And I think now I'm at a position where I can look back and be like, I'm so fortunate, and I'm so glad that I listened to my gut and my intuition, and moved on from companies when I did, and starting my own business. I know that I'm really impatient by nature. So of course, when I left my last job and started my own, like I wanted to just have everything working in the first month. And really what I took for granted is actually that initial period of time when you're building, like that's amazing. You're getting to really understand like, how can this be really authentic to me? What kind of clients do I want to work with? And then before you know it, you're stacked. And I look back and I think, I wish I'd enjoyed that time a little bit more when I had a bit more time on my hands. But at the same time, I've learned to like enjoy the unknown, and know that like I probably am going to have to pivot slightly as I grow. And I don't yet know what the next couple of years look like, but I know for now I'm reaching these short-term goals that I'm setting myself. And that's from only like trusting myself, knowing that I can do this, knowing that I didn't want to anymore let life happen around me. I really wanted to take control and be intentional with how I spend my time, with who I spend my time, what kind of work I want to do. And also I get to go and explore, you know. I think when you're a full-time member of a company, you're really at the mercy of like what the company wants to do. But when you're working for yourself, like you get to go and seek out those projects that are going to afford you the learning experience, and also to like get better at what it is that you enjoy doing.
And speaking of seeking out those projects, do you have an approach for sort of outreach or like finding new clients? What's sort of your approach to that?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I remember when I was starting, I really wanted people to tell me like, how do you do it? Like, how do you just find clients? It's really hard. And I think I mean, I started posting on LinkedIn probably about 6 months ago. And I've noticed that like it has largely come down to my LinkedIn audience, that I've been very intentional in how I've grown that. So, you know, word of mouth. So when I went live, like one of my first clients actually came through because someone that I was connected with referred me to his own client. And I was like, that the power in, you get people that come out of the woodworks that you didn't even know about, and people want to help everyone. Like that's why I think it's really important that you do live by, understand what your principles are and what your values are, and make sure that your positioning is kind of speaking to that and the kind of clients that you want to attract. So yes, building my LinkedIn audience has been integral to how I've been able to find my clients. So not only through referrals, networks, VCs, a lot of the time when you have a new portfolio company that comes into the business, like they need marketing support. So strengthening those relationships, being intentional with obviously organically the audience that I want to grow on LinkedIn, but also seeking out those people, like, doing that homework, exploring these businesses that you don't know exist and like reaching out to them. Hey, can I grab time with you? This is what I'm up to. Like, and again, perfecting the message. So when I first went live, that first LinkedIn message that I was outreaching to people, like it's definitely tweaked by now. It was absolute crap. The more that you tweak your messaging, you figure out what works. And yeah, I think the main thing is building your audience, but also like reaching out to people that you want to work with.
Yeah, that's great advice. And did you start planning starting the company on the side before you left your job, or did you just dive right in?
So it's something that I had a jewelry business that I launched in lockdown, and so I had that kind of like entrepreneurial, like I want to do that again. It didn't work, and these are all the lessons that I have from that. So I always knew that at some point I would like to go and work for myself. At the start of this year, before I moved to Italy, I was doing a lot of traveling, and I remember being in Australia. Actually, I was out there for a conference, really short turnaround time. I was really jet lagged. I was really tired. And I was like, this is not what I want to be doing anymore. My energy just isn't there. And so on the flight back, actually, is when I started designing the Good Marketing Club. It wasn't called the Good Marketing Club. I just knew, like, okay, Emily, you've got 13 years experience now in marketing. Like, go and do that. That's like the light bulb moment. I'd never thought about that in the past. I was trying to do like e-commerce and design work. And then so it kind of happened over time, but I handed my notice in without having the business in place, and then started to craft that. So when I actually left full-time employment, there was only a week gap in between then going live, and it took me 6 weeks to have my first client secured. And then
Wow.
3 months in, I'm now like at max capacity. So you do have to trust that it's going to work, but like you can't rush these things. So yeah, in short, I didn't have a plan, but I knew that I could do it. I was going to make it my mission to make it work.
See, that's so interesting, because a lot of people would consider that really risky. But I think the key there in what you said there was that you had the self-confidence and the determination to make it work no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people have those self-doubts, and so they aren't willing to fully back themselves.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I had savings, and so like I knew what my run rate was of like how long do I have to make this work, and if it didn't work, I could go back to full-time employment. I knew I would be okay. Would I have had that same level of confidence if I didn't have those savings? Maybe not. I don't know. I haven't got a family. I haven't got kids that are dependent on me. But I also do believe that most people can do anything, but fear holds them back. Like, and that's
yeah,
where it is manifest then into like these insecurities. And I just think if more people back themselves, then honestly, there'd be more amazing businesses out there in the world.
I agree. That's what the whole podcast is about. But I think it's important to note what you said there, that you had savings too. So it wasn't just like flying by the seat of your pants, sort of just risky move. You actually planned it, and you knew how long you had. You gave yourself a runway to plan this move and to make sure that it worked out. And I think everyone, if they're considering it, should also consider that too.
I think for sure. And I think especially if you work in marketing, like if you're able to like ask yourself, okay, companies pay me to do this job. You learn so much. And if you can market a company, and it could be like a really boring industry or it could be a really exciting industry, like imagine marketing yourself. Like I think most people don't realize like you're sat on a gold mine of insights, and what you think is just really easy because you know it, because you've learned it, that's valuable to someone. So like start testing it. And I think companies are very quick to, okay, profits are down, let's make these redundancies. Like I think really you should, of course, be loyal to the companies that are good to you, and there's massive value in working for companies. I'm not saying that everyone should go and like build their own portfolio, but if you're not satisfied in life in where you're at, like take a risk on yourself, because you're sitting on more insight than you realize.
Yeah, well said. And what were you most surprised by in the whole process?
Like I said, I think people just the amount of support you get from like the unexpected. Similarly, you also realize that people that you expect to be in your corner aren't necessarily, because I think when you're building a brand and you're building a business, I think oftentimes it can be a bit triggering to people that are like, like close friends that might not be at the same point in life. And so you're not going to have people that like clap for you as much as you think, but that's okay. It's not a personal thing. So yeah, I was really overwhelmed with like the level of support that I got from like people that I didn't even know, and people that I did know, just reaching out with support, referrals, referring me to their friends that are running businesses that need marketing support. So was really surprised by that. And I think just I'm really happy with what I've built. Actually, I think oftentimes you don't want to like. It's a bit uncomfortable, isn't it? Being like I'm really happy with what I've done. And I think I'm getting used to more like backing myself, and that comes from being acknowledging when things are working well, but also recognizing like they're not always going to work well. So how can I safeguard and make sure that like there's going to be a time when a client is going to end a contract, and how do I make sure that that's when that happens it's okay because I've built pipeline and I'm building my community, I'm building my opportunities, and like thinking about the next step. So yeah, lots of lessons, lots of highs, lots of lows, but really glad that I made the choice.
Great. And you mentioned that you moved on from job sometimes on like gut feel.
Mm.
But was that something that you sort of learned over time, or have you always just reacted or acted on like a gut feel?
I'd say earlier on I was far more impulsive than I am now.
Okay.
So like I think my average tenure is like 2.5, 3 years.
Okay.
Early on it was like a year. and I think I think at the time, like think about your parents, most of our generation had parents that had like one or two jobs. So it's
Yeah.
always very uncommon to like move on. But I always felt like I actually remember in one of my first jobs in London after I graduated, there was a guy, Vincent Hayward, if you listen, he said to me, Emily, there's no such thing as a bad job. And that stuck with me because even when you have a job that you don't necessarily love, that is teaching you something about, okay, is it the environment? Is it the work? Is it your own insecurities? And I think like you don't have to stay in environments that aren't good for you. And it's nothing detrimental to a company. It's just like what is in your gut that you want to go and pursue. So I'm less impulsive now, but I do think there's nothing bad in jumping, but there's also value in staying at companies too. So listen to your intuition. Your gut is far better as a reader than like asking your friends and your parents, because a lot of the time they don't know because they haven't done the things that you are actually destined to go and do.
Yeah. And would you say that jumping around a lot actually helped you and equipped you with the skills that you now have today?
Yeah,
Gave you a more diverse
yeah.
experience?
For sure. I think the more that you get better at interviewing, you get better at presenting yourself, you get, like when you start at a new company, like everything's new to you. And so you learn how to like adapt faster. You have more agility. And I'm just talking personally for me. I was able then to, if I'd have stayed at that first job or the second job, like I would have been an expert in PR, solely PR. And now I can look back and think like I've got a really varied mix of experience now. Like I was saying earlier, I understand product marketing, demand generation, brand, how to build a brand, the design, the different components that go into like a successful brand, like copywriting, social, all these different things. So I personally am glad that I jumped ship. Do I think sometimes on reflection I jumped a bit too early? Yeah, for sure. I think when I was definitely in that first role in London, like even getting used to life in London, like that was I just did it a year, and that is one regret that I think I should have stayed a bit longer, got to know the city a bit more, stayed in the job a bit more. But I think there's a difference with quitting and leaving, and I think if a better opportunity comes about, you don't owe it to companies to stay.
Yeah, I agree. And do you feel that working for yourself is better than working for someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm now back in control of like how I spend my time, I'm designing, how I want my weeks to look like. I always make sure that I get a run in every day, how I, even like going out for lunch, meeting friends, either going to a co-working space, working from home. Like I'm far more in control of like how I want to spend my time. And I've always been really big on work-life integration. I don't think you have to always strive for work-life balance, because is there such a thing now? So for me, I love being able to like, be in control of the type of work I want to do, what my days look like. It's risky because, like I said, I've had to learn everything of like taxes, invoices, how to like run a business, sales, the marketing. It's a lot, but for me, it caters to like, I'm someone that can get quite bored of doing the same thing every day. And when you work for yourself, there's definitely no 2 days that are the same.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that seems like a common trait in entrepreneurs, and why a lot of entrepreneurs have a similar sort of career path as you, where they jump from a lot of roles because they don't like being boxed in.
Yeah.
They want to do a little bit of everything. They want to keep stimulated. They want to understand how everything connects. And so if you don't see that sort of growth or trajectory at a company, it's very easy to go on to the next thing because you are chasing that.
That's the thing. I think a lot of businesses have kind of forgotten that like everyone's got their own drivers and they're not all the same. I think companies don't invest enough in like, like in figuring out, well, why do people show up to work? Is it for titles? Is it money? Is it autonomy? Is it experience? Like we all have different things that drive us. And like, I think HR in general, like there's some companies that get it really right. And there's companies that just don't care about actually what it is their people need.
Yeah.
And you're only as good as how your people feel. And that's why, like I recognize in the last company, like I absolutely loved that experience, but I really noticed when my energy had started to shift. And so like, I asked myself, like, what has changed and what is it that I'm looking for? And can that company give this to me? I think having that open dialogue with your employer is so important. People don't want empty promises. People want action, and people want like integrity. And I think that's where I hope companies start to really understand that, because otherwise we're going to see like the gig economy is taking off. And will that slow down, or will companies recognize like, okay, we need to really invest in our people?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's trickier to have that like individualized approach to incentivizing your employees when you're such a large company. I think it's a bit easier. From my experience working in smaller companies, you can have better communication and everyone can be on the same page to understand what your drivers are and what you're working towards in that company. But when you're, let's say, a smaller cog in a huge machine, it's very difficult for, even if it is a large HR department, to focus on each individual employee and give them or incentivize them in a way that feels like they are making an impact in their company.
That's really true. And I think it's true, because you oftentimes, like you touched upon that, like internal communication becomes really, really important. Like people need to know and deserve to know, like, why are decisions being made? What was the context behind these things? But I think also like just tailoring those experiences. Like no company is too big to have a bit more investment into like, okay, what do departments need? Like I'm sure the type of perks that you give or you offer to like marketing is going to be slightly different to development. It's going to be slightly different. Do you know what I mean? So I think you're right in that, like, it's really, really hard to be a massive conglomerate company and really and to have your team members feel like they're understood, they're listened to, they're heard. But I do think you can tailor those experiences and those aspects to make people just feel a bit more valued. Because I think that's the beauty, isn't it, of like working in startups and smaller companies, is that like your voice is heard more. You get to feel validated in what you think and feel. But I think it's an interesting one. I don't think there's one right answer that's going to solve that.
True. And what would you say has been the hardest part about being your own boss so far?
Time management. Like so time blocking for me, I've only just started doing this in the last like 6 weeks, has been a game changer. So before, I've always been someone that's like more of a morning person than a night owl. And in the first like 2 months, I'd say my routine just flipped on its head. So I think, setting those boundaries, blocking time, because the beauty of, like I said, it's great that I now have more time to design like how I want my life to look like. But on the flip side, unless I'm a bit more ruthless with like my own time allocation, you can end up just thinking, well, I'll do this later, and then you don't have evening. So yeah, managing time blocking, and then also for me, it was a bit difficult of, first of all, when I left the last company, like that was such a fast-paced environment, like everything was urgent. And so like giving myself a bit of time to understand and recognize like not everything has to be urgent. Like when I'm working with clients, having a bit more grace of like different businesses have different paces, and I was so used to a very like very fast, like always on way of working, to then actually, Emily, take a bit of time. Actually, how do you want to work? Is that actually sustainable to you?
Yeah, that's very, very important to remember. But it's very easy to be hard on yourself and feel like you're not making progress at times. Are you someone who's quite hard on yourself, or do you show yourself compassion sometimes?
I think I've got a lot better at it this year. So like I do a lot of journaling, and I will tell myself, okay, I'm really proud of you, Emily. Like I've done this thing that for example, I used to hate public speaking, and I've hated it for such a long time. And this year I was like, okay, Emily, if you're going to go and do your business, I know I need to get more comfortable in like putting myself out there. So I do show myself a lot more compassion. I recognize that you're not going to know everything straight away, and you're only going to get better at it through repetition. So I definitely give myself more grace than I used to. That being said, I think inherently we're always going to look at ourselves with a bit more of a critical lens, but I think it's understanding like that's normal. Who am I comparing myself to? I really, I've become a little bit obsessed with like the idea of like you do become your surroundings, you become your thoughts. Like if you're surrounded by ambitious people, like you become more ambitious. If you surround yourself with people that are a bit more lazy, like you're going to become lazier. So I'm really intentional now with like who and where I spend my time and what I spend my time doing. And that in itself has afforded me to be kinder to myself, because I'm not starting my business at the same time as someone that's like killing it, that's doing a great job, that they're like earning lots of money, and because they maybe started 2 years earlier, right? I think you always have to like remind yourself that we're all at different stages, we all have different strengths, and actually someone that is now an expert in X was once a beginner. I think that's a really important thing to remember. Like you don't know everything as soon as you get started, so like give yourself grace.
Yeah. And how are you surrounding yourself with at the moment? Or
So
what?
this is like the beauty of like coming to Florence. I knew no one really, and so I'm someone that I love fitness, so I joined running clubs. That in itself has kind of afforded me to get to know more like-minded people. I joined a co-working space. There's lots of entrepreneurs, freelancers that I've met through the co-working environments. My partner, so being really intentional with who I surround myself with. And that goes as far as like, what am I consuming? What podcasts am I listening to? What people am I following on my Instagram, on my LinkedIn? Like, where am I going to for energy, and how am I topping up my cup when I feel like a bit depleted? So, for example, I reached out I think you have to really invest in your community and your network. And so I know when I started reaching out to people, sometimes just for a little bit of support and advice, like that was so powerful of then being introduced to another person that actually like that sparked an idea, and they said like you should connect with this person because they're doing something similar. I think just getting comfortable and like putting yourself out there, and being intentional with who and what you want to spend your time doing. And it's
And
a lot easier than you think.
yeah, I agree. And in line with reaching out to people and things like that, you mentioned that you have a mentor or something along those lines at the moment. How important has mentorship been for you on this journey?
Oh my gosh, huge. And I think mentorship doesn't have to be like an official, like this person now knows they're my mentor. Like a mentor can be a friend. A mentor can be someone that you reach out to a few times for a quick chat. Like mentorship can even be a podcast that you subscribe to that they have no idea that they're your mentor, right? But for me, it was really integral because like I've not done this before. I don't know everything about how to run a successful, like I'm based in the UK, Italy. The business is based in the UK. How do I make all these things work? So I had to get advice and guidance for multiple things. So for me, it's really important because also I did a lot of reflection when I was just getting started. I didn't know who to go to, and I think with marketing, because oftentimes everything's more it's more of a complicated than it needs to be. Like, there's so many buzzwords and acronyms, and even when you subscribe to like a lot of marketing podcasts, I love ones like this where it's like, let's cut through the noise and like let's just speak in a real language, how we would speak if we were having a drink in a pub, right? And I had a lot of people reaching out to me to see if I was actually going to go and actually offer mentorship as a service. And that's something that I'm really interested in, because I think you don't often in marketing like really know where to go to. And yes, you're fortunate if you have a mentor, but a lot of people don't. And that is something that I would like to explore. But for sure, in me starting this like journey that I'm on, like mentorship has been really key. And it's doing that reflection of like who I would have gone to for advice in the past. Like, I haven't gone to those same people because they haven't done what I'm trying to do. So yeah, really important.
Yeah, cool. And as you touched on there's a lot of buzzwords in marketing. It's also a very fast-paced, ever-changing sector. So how do you keep up with what's going on and what works and what doesn't?
I think for me, it's always come down to like curiosity. When I worked for actually a creative agency based in Manchester, it was a creative and design agency, and I learned through that experience. So coming back to your earlier question, like
Sure.
every experience like gives you the lessons that I think you need in marketing, because the design agency was really keen on everyone exploring in different sectors. So, for example, if a brief came in and say if it was like a beverage brand, do you go and look at like the category leaders in the drinks world, or do you go and look elsewhere for like where is that, what's capturing the attention of that audience that you're looking to like buy? And curiosity, I think, for me has always been quite inherent, but for sure, as I've kind of like grown up and with what I'm doing now, like being really curious of like podcasts, new podcasts that are coming out there, new thought leaders, people that are building their personal brands, like trying to reverse engineer, like how did they do that? Like when they started, they were nowhere near as popular as where they are now. So like being really curious to like look back and figure out the mechanics. I think reverse engineering is such a super skill that not many people really understand like how powerful it is. So yeah, being really curious. And I always try and think of like executions that I'm doing a lot of work in B2B at the moment, and like I look a lot to B2C to see like, well, what are the cool things that happen there and how can I bring this into the B2B world? Because I'm so glad that the B2B world is having this kind of renaissance and understanding that actually like brand, like business marketing doesn't have to be really dull. There's lots of great things that happen there. So yeah, just being curious.
And how do you manage your priorities? Like you said, now you're running your own business. There's so many things to do. Like, how do you decide what to focus on at what time?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that time blocking thing. So at the start of the
Okay.
week, I'll like make lists. I'm still quite old school that I like to do that on paper. Write lists, but then time block. I look at my system. So, you know, I do a lot of work through Notion and through Google Sheets, and like making sure that I'm actually analyzing like what is taking me time at the moment that's actually taking more of my time away from the things that are actually more integral to the business. And so trying to make those optimizations and improvements in that way. So always start the week with, okay, this is what I want to achieve by the end of the week, making lists around that. And then at the end of the week, trying to do as much of a retrospective as possible. Because I think all too often you can think you have to do everything. And actually, there's certain things that I might be working on that are not benefiting my clients. They're not benefiting me. They're just something that I'm being distracted by, and just trying to cut out as many of those distractions as possible, whilst also reminding myself that like I've got a life as well, and I want to make sure that I'm exercising, I'm seeing the people that fill my cup, and yeah, just being really intentional with that.
Great. And what is the long-term vision for the Good Marketing Club?
To be honest, it's I feel like it's still too early on to really know. I know that I'm very much maxed out on time at the moment, and that is not something that I want to keep doing, because you know, repeatable recurring revenue, does that always need to be baked on time? Like I mentioned, I'm really keen to explore like the whole educational mentorship side, and figuring out, can I actually start to offer more service-based activity rather than always being billable by time? So exploring that, I haven't really got it figured out just yet, but having some interesting conversations that will, I'm sure, lead to a firmer plan, hopefully at the start of next year. And yeah, at the moment, it's just really reviewing like what's working, what's not, what's making me feel good, what's making me feel not so good, and like doubling down in that. So the plan is, I think, with the Good Marketing Club, I feel like it's got an opportunity to go into multiple areas given just the name, with having like a club, so like a membership style to it. But what that looks like, I don't yet know. So TBC, I'd
Awesome. That's exciting.
say.
And if you could give advice to someone thinking about starting their own business, what would you tell them?
Just get started. Like, don't wait for that perfect time. Just start building your brand, and you'll learn just through repetition, like what is working and what's not working. There's never been an easier time to start. I think it's only going to get harder as more people become more clued up to actually, like, personal branding is actually a lot easier than you think it is. There's so many people that aren't using LinkedIn to their advantage, and I think just start testing it now, figuring out what works, and figuring it out as you go. You don't have to have a plan always. Like, just recognize that, like, the bar to enter is actually not as high as you think, and just believe in yourself.
That's great advice. And what do you think makes a good marketer these days?
I think it comes back to curiosity. I think, don't expect that you start a job when you're going to learn everything through that job. Like, it's something that you should really be investing in your free time as well. Like, subscribe to the ChatGPT Pro and like start to figure out like how do these tools all work. Like, go and look for mentors. Like I said, the podcast that you can listen to, like the amount that I learn through podcasts actually, rather than on the job a lot of the time, because yeah, your learning can live everywhere. If I think back to like my university degree, like I learned nothing if I compare that to then being out in the real world. So just be curious, be hungry, like don't be afraid to like go knock on someone's door or send an email that's going to like benefit your future, because yeah, you have to. I remember hearing on a podcast actually, like, if you don't know what to do in life but you're doing nothing to actually discover that, then you almost like deserve to not know. It's like, just go and be hungry and be curious, and it will get you somewhere.
I agree. I was actually messing around with some AI UI tools last night, figuring out their capabilities and what kind of landing pages they can build and stuff. And it's actually really impressive.
Insane.
And so, yeah, it's like there's no excuse to just mess around with these things and start and see what happens.
What do you think though? Because like we're all accepting the fact that like AI now is something for us here now to really utilize as tools. These tools just make us better at what we do.
Yeah.
But I feel as though and I'm just noticing this from client work, like when clients or people know that you're using AI, like ChatGPT, for example, there's this like misconception of like, oh, is that a lazy thing? It's like, no, the narrative, the understanding around AI, I think is still so premature. I would love to see that shift, because I think most people are still really afraid of it coming to take their job. So they're just not understanding like the sheer impact
I agree.
of these tools.
Yeah. And it is the kind of like sad reality, particularly in writing, although I feel like an AI tool's writing output can't beat a human, particularly if you're telling a story about yourself or like sharing content on LinkedIn. I'd feel like it does a subpar job. But in terms of the tools I was messing around with last night, like Galileo AI creates user interfaces that you can export into Figma, and then you can edit completely. So you can still have human input, you can still tweak things, but it's creating an output from scouring the web and looking at what does well, what everyone's sort of creating at the moment. And so it's giving you a starting point. Like, that would take hours to create a landing page in Figma from scratch, but now you have a base. You've given it a prompt of what you want it to do, and then you can go in and change the colors and move buttons around and stuff. It just helps you so much. It prevents the blank page problem, which I think is really cool.
You hit the nail on the head. Like, it just affords us back time, and I think we all will complain that like we're being pushed and we haven't got enough time. It's like, well, we've got these tools now to help that. Of course, like if you're a creative, I can understand like the more that you see ads that are being pushed out, which is like solely built on AI, that is a little bit scary. But at the same time, to your point, like you can't beat human touch when it comes to storytelling, copywriting, right? These things are to be embraced and not seen as this big scary monster that's coming for all of our jobs.
Yeah, exactly. and try them out. Like, you never know what could help you and what won't, but avoiding them is just going to sort of, I don't know, leave you behind.
Definitely. I think it's going to separate the good from the average, I'd say.
Yeah. And before I end every conversation, I ask my guests if they have a question for me.
Yeah. So I would love to know, like, where do you get your inspiration from? What's the go-to?
So my inspiration is just personal growth, wanting to just be the best version of myself I can be, and at the same time lead an interesting life. And I'm still working on that because I feel like I'm making decisions that from the outside looking in could make my life seem interesting, but then there's things falling to the wayside that I need to prioritize more, like friends and family. I don't devote as much time to as I should. So I'm still figuring out the whole balance of it. But I was actually thinking about this. Was it today or yesterday? That like I want to just look back on my life and feel like I didn't just stay in one thing for too long and like regretted or wondering what if. I just don't want to wonder what if. And so yeah, that's my driving force, I suppose.
That's really similar. I think it's beautiful, isn't it? It's like that understanding that like one day you're going to look back and like you're either going to think, wow, I've really lived, or I remember actually my last boss in the last company said to me, like, one day your life will flash like a film and you have to make sure that it's a film that's going to be worth watching. Otherwise, like, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's true. I'm afraid of having regrets. So like everything that comes my way, like really think about it before I say no, or go and look for those opportunities.
Yeah, and there's elements now, even looking back, where I felt like I stayed in one thing for a bit longer than I should have. But I can't change that, and so I've just got to focus on making the next steps interesting and worthwhile ones.
I think you're killing it. I think I'm really excited to hear about all the things you get up to next.
Thanks, Emily. And thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation. If people want to find out more about you and the Good Marketing Club, where can they do so?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, so Emily Dunlop, or look for the Good Marketing Club. Drop me a message, always open for a chat. No sales pitches, just some good old fashioned chinwags. But yeah, really enjoy this conversation as well. Glad that we're on a Friday. Good way to start the weekend.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks again, Emily. Chat soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.